Imagine sitting in a concrete cell, watching the seasons change outside a tiny window, marking off the days. Now imagine doing that for 5 years. Not because a jury found you guilty, but just waiting for a trial to begin. That is the reality for Tasleem Ahmed and Saifi. After spending half a decade behind bars, they were recently granted a 6-month interim bail. Authorities accuse them of being involved in the larger conspiracy behind the deadly Delhi riots of 2020. But while Ahmed and Saifi are receiving a brief reprieve, their co-accused, Umar Khalid, remains trapped in an endless legal limbo, still waiting for his day in court. This legal standstill stems from the application of a controversial anti-terror law, the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act, or UAPA. When a justice system normalizes holding unconvicted people for half a decade, the boundary between waiting for justice and serving a sentence begins to disappear. The UAPA was designed as a tool to keep high-risk terror threats off the streets during active investigations. To achieve that, the law makes bail exceptionally difficult to obtain. It effectively shifts the burden of proof, requiring the accused to demonstrate their innocence to a judge just to secure a release before trial. In the Delhi riots case, authorities used this framework to classify actions taken during widespread civilian protests as acts of terror. This creates a structural bottleneck. Because UAPA cases typically involve thousands of pages of evidence and hundreds of witnesses, the court proceedings naturally stretch on for years. Pairing a no-bail mandate with a slow-moving judiciary creates a cycle where the accused are effectively trapped in a state of permanent pretrial detention. A challenge to this cycle emerged through a legal counterforce, the landmark K.A. Najib precedent. The Najib ruling established that the constitutional right to a speedy trial can eventually override UAPA's strict bail restrictions if the delay becomes too extreme. Lower court judges find themselves caught between conflicting mandates, the UAPA text requiring detention and the Najib precedent requiring release. This fragmented landscape means judges issue entirely different rulings on identical cases, depending on which principle they prioritize. The uncertainty became so significant that the Supreme Court recently halted its own proceedings on Umar Khalid's bail application. The court referred the entire question of how UAPA bail should be handled to a larger bench to establish a clear, nationwide standard. By calling for this referral, the highest court is acknowledging that the current application of anti-terror laws has created a systemic failure that lower courts can no longer resolve. This brings us back to Tasleem Ahmed and Saifi, who have finally left their cells. Their release is governed by strict, restrictive conditions, and their freedom is only guaranteed for the next 6 months. Even outside prison walls, they remain under a tight state leash, having secured a temporary reprieve without being cleared of the underlying charges. When the Supreme Court's larger bench eventually convenes, their decision will reach far beyond Umar Khalid's individual fate. They must define the exact point where the state's interest in national security must yield to a citizen's fundamental right to liberty. If the law allows a citizen to be held for 5 years without the state ever proving its case in court, the process itself becomes the punishment. And in that scenario, the promise of a fair trial becomes a hollow one.